Imagine your data, AI data to be exact. Data comprised of billions of pulses of light that travel over and across the internet, carrying information derived from intelligence that is critical to your business. If your business relies on real-time data delivery arriving at a second's notice without quick crash or system failure, Supermicro is the clear choice, delivering extreme performance with petascale all-flash NVMe storage to support proven architectures for AI and ML workloads with leading software-defined storage platforms. If you're an enterprise business, government agency, or in the education and research sector building a public cloud, private cloud, or generative AI supercluster, there's only one choice. And that choice can only be exactly the best.
Hello, and welcome to this session of the Supermicro Open Storage Summit on the new Hyperconverged, enabling high-performance workloads for enterprise. I'm Rob Strechay, Managing Director with theCUBE Research, and your moderator for this special session. With enterprise AI being the #1 priority for organizations where they deploy and how they build out the Gen AI infrastructure is important. Cloud is not a place but an operating model, and data has gravity, and most data storage is on site and is key to intellectual property for those organizations. Core data to service customers and to build new products is really where that intellectual property spans from. Many times we see applications being built on top of hyperconverged infrastructure platforms, or HCI platforms in storage. In particular, we see organizations taking a cloud-native HCI approach as they build out their Gen AI applications and deploy them to production, such as deploying RAG, training, and inference workloads. This is especially true when you look at hybrid multi-cloud as being the vast majority of organizations are building out these infrastructures, looking to put the right workload in the right place at the right cost. According to research from our partner at ETR, we see that 50% of new applications are being built outside the hyperscaler clouds. This will be increasingly true with Gen AI, where milliseconds and even microseconds of response time are going to be a requirement for inference. HCI has been around for a minute. Organizations continue to want that easy button for a cloud operating model. Today, we're going to expand on where it is today and where it is going in the future. Just as a reminder, all the materials from all the partners you're going to see up here on the stage are available in the session link on the registration website on thecube.net. And the speakers will be live on X to take your questions. Just use the hashtag SupermicroStorage2024, all one word, to ask some questions. Now let me introduce our speakers. First off, we have Wendell Wenjen, who's the Director of Storage Market Development from Supermicro. We have Christine McMonigal, who's the Director of Hyperconverged Marketing at Intel, Oscar Wahlberg, who is the Senior Director of Product Management at Nutanix, and Praveen Midha, Director of Segment and Technical Marketing, Data Center Flash, Western Digital. Hey, Wendell, why don't you kick us off and give us an overview and to start us off here?
Thanks, Rob. As you said, hyperconverged infrastructure has been around for a minute, actually a couple of decades. But just as a review of what we're really talking about is a server-based technology where the CPU, the network is virtualized, uses software-defined storage that's shared across the different servers. And it's a scale-out architecture. So as you add more server nodes into this network, you're adding more computing and storage capacity. So it's a really great infrastructure for the enterprise. It really allows that easy delivery of capacity and the management of those systems. And so we at Supermicro have been working for many years with Intel, Nutanix, and Western Digital on developing and deploying and enabling customers to use those solutions. And I think one of the things we want to convey is things that we've learned in that process. And so the first thing really is that having a large portfolio of products that really fits that customer requirement is really necessary, right? It's not just an appliance where you have a choice of one or two models. You really have a a large portfolio of just servers, storage, networking, and now a lot of it is GPU servers. And we have both blade and rack form factors. But it's not just having that hardware that's really going to make that solution. You really have to work with all of these partners on engineering and optimizing that solution. So that's a lot of the work, I think, that goes into that solution, before anything ever gets shipped. And that's really key. Another thing to really consider is having the latest technology and industry standards that you're deploying. I think, a lot of times companies like to do their own proprietary thing, which seems cool, but when you go out and try to upgrade that, when you try to buy more capacity, it just gets to be, really expensive, and you really, may have some buyer's regret. So things like PCI Gen 5, which, Intel has been really a leader in, CXL, which we have another session coming up just on that topic that allows you to expand that server memory beyond what's directly attached to the CPU. Form factors for SSDs that we work on with Western Digital, things like EDSFF, E3.S, E1.S, those form factors that have been very commonly adopted or are getting more increasingly adopted by the industry, the SSD vendors delivering that, and things like OCP, the Open Compute Platform, standard building blocks for, say, things like motherboards. So that's one, another area to consider. I think a fourth area is really thinking about that whole logistics delivery process, right? It's not just you order something and it shows up, but really you want the company that's managing the supply chain behind all the parts and pieces that are going into your solution. You want it to be factory tested with the software installed and burned in the factory. And then, for very large integrations and very large deployments where you're doing rack scale integration, you want that done in the factory for, quick power on. Another thing, so the fifth thing really, is that field support, right? So what happens when things go wrong, which we hope doesn't happen, but you want to be really confident that if something does happen, that there's going to be, a lot of backstop behind that. And so having that process where, all the partners delivering that solution have a process for first call support, different service plans on the hardware, and that just general coordination so that things are just, we're not, saying it's somebody else's fault, right? And finally, I think having a very broad industry ecosystem is really important, right? So working with all of the leading ISVs, working with the leading CPU, GPU partners, and storage media partners is really critical so that you have the choices of the best, in the market.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think it doesn't hurt that you guys have partnered up with the OG of HCI, which would be Nutanix, from the beginning. So Oscar, why don't you kind of take us through where you've been and where you're going here?
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, the way I normally think about this is really as an evolution, right? When our engineering team started building our HCI solutions some 15 years ago, what we came to market with was really, at the core, a scale-out storage solution that also folded networking and virtualization in the platform, creating a true hyper-converged infrastructure, right? That was targeted at VDI solutions using hybrid storage, and that's kind of how we got our name and how we kind of, earned our bones, so to speak, right? But reality is that as our customers grew very comfortable running VDI solutions on Nutanix, they started wanting to virtualize more and more applications and different platforms. So we moved into general storage, general server virtualization, I should say, right? That really pushed the envelope a little bit on what we could do at the time, and that made us innovate. And that's something that's been constant throughout our years, right? We've innovated using both, software innovation, but also by leveraging newer technologies. So we started leveraging newer network technologies like RDMA, for example, for offloading, essentially CPU cycles to networking cards so that we could free up more CPU to the user VMs, right? Then the SSD revolution came in, right? And we started using all flash systems to drive the performance even higher. That in turn actually forced us to rethink some of our storage layers to make sure that we drove those SSDs the best way possible, because all of a sudden they can do thousands and thousands of IOPS versus a traditional hard drive, right? So we really needed to rewrite what we think about as our block storage layer. And we rewrote that to optimize for SSDs. We used things like Intel's SPDK to make sure that we could leverage accelerations in the CPUs and drive the SSDs. And even more importantly, the NVMEs when they came on market in a better way. So this innovation over the years have really taken us into completely different parts of the data centers. If we started with VDI and then general VM virtualizations, our customers today are virtualizing every workload they have. If you can run the workload as a virtual machine, you can run it on Nutanix HCI. In fact, some 70% of our customers today run their mission-critical databases on Nutanix. So it's been a very big shift for us in general in terms of the capability of the core platforms by using hardware and software together. What we see today is the AI generation, if you will, coming on board, right? So now we see a lot more asks around how do I actually run AI and ML workloads on HCI. We launched the GPT-in-a-Box solution last year that targets that type of market, makes it easy for customers to get a turnkey solution. I'm looking forward to see what we can do next by leveraging more tighter integrations in terms of like just AI and ML, but also the newer generation of SSDs, like Wendell talked about EDSFF, which basically helps us get density even higher, right? So all of these things really work together to create a great system.
Yeah, I think again, what's key to this whole thing is that really when you start to look at how it all comes together, the processor sits at the core of this. And like you said, there's technologies around it to help it be used more efficiently to service even more and denser workloads, which I think AI is one of those that really requires that to really work very well with the processor. But Christine, why don't you kind of take us into where Intel's at these days?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I sometimes get asked, what is Intel's role? What is Intel doing in HCI? And we really want to maximize value for our customers to make sure they're getting everything they can out of their data center and hybrid cloud investments. And we recognize that it's typically business challenges that are really driving those infrastructure choices, right? The customer experience improvements, or tightening up security, or enabling your distributed workforce to be more efficient, et cetera. And so it's those business challenges that are really the driver, and HCI has proven itself as really a capable, flexible, scalable infrastructure, particularly when you look at Nutanix, that can run a range of business critical workloads and often reduce costs as well. And so we collaborate with partners like Nutanix on developing end-to-end solutions where we're benchmarking different configurations to really put together the guidance on how to best run those critical workloads on HCI. And some of the trends that I'm seeing, around the edge is a very popular place to deploy HCI because you've got compute and storage being deployed together, being able to manage those together, and being able to deploy it remotely as well if you don't have IT staff on site. And some of the shift that I'm seeing in edge is that people want even more capable infrastructure at the edge to be able to run those analytics and AI workloads locally. Accelerators, GPUs have been used for VDI workloads for a long time, but of course now we're seeing them used for AI workloads as well. And also accelerators being used for things like compression and encryption. Enhanced hybrid cloud, Nutanix continues to enhance their cloud platform. And when you've got that management plane that enables you with that single pane of glass to be able to manage your workloads regardless of the environment, and having that consistent software and hardware infrastructure layer really gives you that flexibility to be able to move and place your workloads wherever it makes the most sense for the business. From a sustainability perspective, HCI really contributes towards net zero as well, having that consolidation approach between compute and storage and saving on space, power, cooling in the process. And then finally, I wanted to touch on the shifting vendor dynamics that we've been seeing in the last year with first the sale of Citrix to a private equity firm, then the Broadcom acquisition of VMware, and then the sale of Horizon to private equity as well. So some of these things are causing organizations to sort of rethink their infrastructure strategies and really kind of think about what is going to make the most sense for them longer term, and it may be different than the answer was a couple of years ago. But Intel's going to be there for you as that consistent underlying layer regardless.
Yeah, I think that's the key, and I think, again, it's all of this working together. And basically, at the end of the day, the data has to sit somewhere, and we bring back Praveen from Western Digital to kind of help us understand how Western Digital is really working in this HCI world as well.
Sure, thanks. Happy to talk about it. So before we dig a little bit deeper into the AI data cycle, I just want to recognize that no conversation today is complete without AI. And as Oscar has talked about how HCI grew up in the VDI workload environment and then into mission critical workloads. But we are also seeing this whole excitement around AI and enterprises figuring out or trying to figure out what do I do, how do I do with AI. So what we did was I have two slides. First is really to unpack the AI data cycle, especially from a storage perspective. And then we talk about how do you map some of the workloads that are deployed on HCI to the underlying storage characteristics. So from an AI data cycle perspective, we've laid out 6 stages, and we talk about what those stages are and what the KPIs are and what the media mix is for each of these. But before we, again, talk about AI data cycle, it's important to realize that data is the underpinning of AI. Data is fueling the growth of AI. And at the core of it, data is all about, AI is about data utilization and data processing. In fact, as we try to peel the onion, we are finding out that AI is actually only as interesting or as complete as the data underlying is, and it creates a virtuous cycle of large sets of data helping us build more meaningful models, and then these models then are being used for inference, which then again generate more new data. So you end up in this virtuous cycle of data consumption and then new data generation. So coming back to the stages, on the very far left we have stage 1, which is really about cold storage. This is mostly HDDs, and WD has a play there with high capacity HDDs, but we're also seeing some SSDs there, mostly higher capacities SSDs. This is where variety and quality of data is important. Then you enter the data preparation and ingestion phase, which is where you essentially transform the data. You clean it, you prepare it, you transform the data, and this is where you need some performance, and you start mostly using SSDs, but it's all sequential performance. Now you're ready for your third stage, which is where you iterate your models and you start to build out your AI model and assign parameters and basically start getting to your next stage of checkpointing and restore. So as you're going through your model, the SSDs that are inside the CPU-GPU complex, they need to be high performing, latest PCI Gen 5, EDSFF, like we talked about, E1S, perhaps, or an E3S. But the focus is on performance now. Mostly random reads and random reads and sequential reads. And then, of course, checkpoint and restore is where you progressively, as you're going through iterating your model training, you are taking snapshots and you are pushing it into the local SSD, and then over a period of time, flushing it into your tier 2 storage. And last but not the least are stages 5 and 6. Stage 5 is where the magic happens, where you take your AI model, you deploy it, and you marry it up with real-time data, and then you're able to make predictions. And then stage 6 is where, as you are delivering these new insights, you're creating new content, and that feeds the whole virtuous cycle of new data being used to feedback and even make your models refined or more better for inference purposes. So that's the high-level view on the AI data cycle. And I think in this slide, what I've done is we've created a 2x2, like a magic quadrant, to really lay out how do you map these different workloads that you're running on VDI, be it a large object store, or a VDI, or a mission-critical workload, or a NoSQL. How do you map them to their underlying storage I/O needs? So what we've done here is a 2x2, where we've gone across on the y-axis on the capacity vector, and on the x-axis across the write versus the read intensity. And I'm not going to read through the whole slide, but essentially it maps out how a storage architect would look at the underlying workload and its underlying storage needs and map to a high-performance SSD or a high-capacity SSD. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that'll be key, and I think as people get to see all of this as we go through, really that does help to really lay out where you need to be within that. And I think it goes back to the workloads, and it goes back to what I talked about up front, which is with the right place for the right workload at the right cost. And I think that, again, when you start to look at, and we've done some research, you see that actually in our power law distribution of Gen AI, actually the workloads and the actual models start to get smaller, but more prevalent. And there's many more of them. And we see that the vast majority of Gen AI is going to be these SLMs, or small language models, that are actually deployed at the edge on CPUs, on hyperconverged, in these edge and telco, but that's all still part of a cloud operating model for these. So Wendell, you spoke about some of the key things customers need to think about when deploying hyperconverged systems. Supermicro and Nutanix have been working together for many years to deliver leading hyperconverged solutions, most notably the Nutanix NX system, which utilized Supermicro systems with Intel Xeon processors, which are specific things Supermicro is providing to enable these solutions. Wendell, what is it that really brings this together?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So, the first thing is, as you pointed out, and we have here on the table, this is a 2U server that we've worked with Nutanix on optimizing and validating. It comes with Nutanix pre-installed. It's very they actually have a different bezel, but it's the same server, and as you said, it has Intel Xeon processor powered. But so a lot of that is from our products, our server portfolio products from Supermicro. On the storage side, we really have a very similar view that Praveen talked about, where we have we plot our products against performance and capacity. And if we look on the right side, we see our products that are really optimized for high performance. These are our all-flash products. So on the very right, we have our flagship petascale all-flash storage server that's both in a 1U and 2U form factor. We have a product we just launched called our high availability SBB product. It's kind of reminiscent of Storage Bridge Bay. It's a dual node server that does failover from one to the other, so really good for scale-up storage. And then we have Simply Double, sort of in the middle, sort of a hybrid, both flash and disk with product that really is very popular, especially with the hyperscale and service provider crowd, but also makes a really great product for hyperconverged. And then to the left side, we have our very high capacity products, where we're leading with our top loading product that has up to 90 disk drives and 1 or 2 processor nodes, and then our enterprise products, which are a little bit less capacity but shallower depth. And so all these products are available with Intel Xeon server processors, right? And kind of overlaying what these products are, we can see that from a kind of application standpoint, we see that the all-flash products are really good for virtualization, hyperconverged, as well as parallel file systems, scale-out file systems, databases, VDI. And on the right side, those high-capacity products are really good for object storage, backup and archive, NAS, and things like that, block storage. So we've really kind of have a very wide portfolio. I think Supermicro is well known for having the widest portfolio of servers, storage, and GPU accelerated server products, really in the market. And so whatever your configuration, front I/O, back I/O, different numbers of servers, disk drives, you name it, we have it.
Yeah, I think to me that is wide, and you're going to need almost 2 slides next time you're here, probably. So, but Oscar, I think you've talked about hyperconverged started as a solution for VDI or virtual desktop. Basically how people got virtual desktops. And I know from way back in the day, I had a lot of financial organizations I would talk to that were using Nutanix and hyperconverged for their trading platforms. And if you can think of anything that's not requires throughput and performance, trading is pretty right in there. So how does Nutanix now really enable HCI to tackle the latest enterprise workloads, including AI, transaction processing, enterprise applications in general? Since we're talking about storage for hyperconverged, let's talk about how Nutanix has really, developed that unified data services platform for core, edge, and cloud, and Nutanix platform offering unified file, block, and object storage services, including analytics, lifecycle management, and data protection. What are all the challenges of providing all these types of different services to all of the different workloads?
It's a lot to unpack there, Rob.
Yeah.
I think, to me, the biggest part with that question is really the diversity of the ecosystem you're just talking about. You're talking about, from the edge to the core data center to cloud, right? As well as a lot of different workloads. To me, the diversity of the problem is the biggest piece, and how you manage that problem. For one thing, what we focus on is having what we think about as a cloud operating model. So as long as you basically should be able to manage these workloads the same way if it's running on the edge or in the data center or in a cloud, in a public cloud environment, right? So that's number one. The other part is really the difference in storage and technology capabilities and needs for edge versus core data center and cloud, right? And we've been very successful in creating our scale-out storage solution, right? That underpins all of that. On top of that, we've built products and capabilities to not just serve block, which was our traditional method for HCI and virtualization workloads, but also for file and block storage solutions, file and object storage solutions, right? So you really have all 3 major protocols. That allows us to serve a wide variety of workloads, regardless of where they run, right? But that, virtualization and then moving into AI ML workloads, for example, file and object become really important. And they're really a little bit different on what they need from the underlying platform. Object for deep archive needs big volumes of data, maybe not as fast for deep archive. And then file needs a variety of different things. Block always needs kind of smaller IOs, transactional workloads in general, right? Obviously, I'm generalizing a little bit here, right? But that means that we need to be able to run small things at the edge, big things in terms of capacity for archival object workloads, as well as really, really fast all-flash storage for block storage. But we're also seeing the all-flash solutions start growing in capacity to be able to serve file workload at a high capacity and high throughput, high IO transaction from a file workload, as well as actually, surprisingly enough, object storage on flash. But all of these things is really, in a sense, the bread and butter for a unified storage solution, which is something that Nutanix provides today.
Yeah, and I think that to me is one of the keys is that it's making all of that simple as well, yeah. And that it's one place to go, one operating model. And I think, leveraging the power of what's underneath. And I think, Christine, Intel has made recent announcements on the Xeon processor with increased core counts, PCIe lane count have increased, compute and storage performance. Tell us about the latest advancements and how they really benefit HCI solutions.
Sure, thanks, Rob. Yeah, our 5th gen of Xeon scalable processors does all the things that you just mentioned, increased the number of cores, increased the performance of each core, memory bandwidth, PCIe Gen 5. But on top of those things, we also integrated a number of accelerators into the CPU itself, specifically for business critical workloads, the kinds of workloads that are running on Nutanix today, things like databases, analytics, AI, or to help the function of the HCI solution itself, things like data movement and security and load balancing. So those key capabilities we really feel takes the platform to the next level. And just a couple of examples here, security, we've accelerated encryption for data at rest. We've also added capabilities there with a confidential computing integrated, and we're the only platform that has both app level and virtualization level trusted execution environments. Or for AI, we've integrated an advanced matrix extensions, or AMX, into each core in the Xeon processor, specifically to accelerate AI workloads. And you might not use this integrated accelerator to train a large language model. We have GPUs for that. But it's ideal for other stages of the pipeline, from data ingest all the way to inference, and can really deliver just the kind of performance needed for the types of HCI AI workloads that people are most likely to be running. Things like, smaller language models up to 10 billion parameters, or things like RAG, where they're bringing in that private corporate data, or MLDL workloads. Often people think that they can't do anything in AI unless they have that NVIDIA GPU, but that's not the case. You can actually segment your workloads and look at different stages of the pipeline, different size models, different types of AI workloads, and really tailor your performance and save on cost in terms of hardware and software and power at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that's the key, and kind of playing off of what you said. Also, the file aspect with RAG, and funny enough, all underneath that is actual disks. So Praveen, Western Digital has been a leader in driving flash adoption in storage, including high capacity dies with quad level cell technology, which increases capacities and lowers cost per terabyte, which is great benefit for read intensive workloads like AI. We see that with RAG a lot. At the same time, triple level cell technology, or TLC, for those who are in the know, I guess you could say, is still popular due to the high write endurance it offers for high write workload like transaction processing. SSDs are required for HCI to achieve high throughput and IOPS needed for storage virtualization workloads. So where does Western Digital see the trends in the industry for SSDs going? Because you guys are at the forefront.
So thanks for that setup. I think you really helped kind of answer the question for me yourself.
I didn't mean to do that, by the way.
We are very jazzed about the opportunity we have in front of us. The enterprise SSD continues to flourish. We think we are only seeing solid tailwinds with AI, ML. That's only creating a more uplift in the overall opportunity size. But to your earlier point, yes, we pretty much divide the world along two axes. It's either performance density or capacity density. For performance density, you need something like a TLC, smaller capacity, but you need something that can deliver the highest IOPS and sequential line rate for reads, and close to the maximum random writes and sequential writes. And we have solutions like the Carrera PCI Gen 5 solution there today. Also on QLC, we have 30 and 60 terabyte Coffee Bay Plus today. And these solutions also work with our HDD partners, which can offer up to 28 terabyte HDDs. So whether you're talking about, on the far left, say a cold archival storage, to a warm storage, to a hot storage. We can service all of these workloads, all of these I/O profiles with our portfolio. And we think that as we go forward, this whole virtuous data cycle that we talked about is only helping create more hunger, more thirst for data capture and data store, and WD benefits from all of those trends. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think again, when you start to look at hyperconverged and where it's going to go, I think again, it fits so well for, like Christine was saying, workloads that are going to be inference or RAG out at the edge, because that's where latency to the app, and if the app is your phone, the far edge, if you want to call it that, again, getting as close to that. And I think, Wendell, you even talked about how Supermicro is really doing the engineering side to bring this all together as part of that. But for everybody, hyperconverged infrastructure from 5 years ago is very different from today's implementation, with significant advances in software, CPU, and storage capabilities that are there today. How are customers using these capabilities, and what is the future of hyperconverged infrastructure? And why don't we start with Christine, and we'll end with Oscar, so we'll go this way around, that way. So.
Yeah, I think the future for HCI is bright. I think it will continue to evolve its capabilities and continue to advance. It has such advantages in terms of its streamlining deployment and management and how that saves costs. I don't think it's going to go anywhere soon. And I think people will just, put more workloads on, more demanding workloads, and that will just continue to increase over time.
Wendell.
I've been in the IT industry for 30 years. I started at Intel, marketing the very first server CPUs. I just cannot think of a more exciting time to be delivering all this capability out to the market. We launched or we announced our first set of, new Intel Xeon 6 products, and we have, some more products coming out very soon. I just read an interview with Nutanix's CEO about one of their initiatives, which is to, really support AI training with all these new protocols in their storage stack, and then, just the great capacity products and performance products that Western Digital is delivering, both on the disk side with, coming up, I think, 30 terabyte disk drives, and then even delivering today 60 terabyte SSD products is just truly amazing.
Praveen?
Sure. I think customers are on a journey. There is no one size fits all. There is private cloud, there's public cloud, there's hybrid cloud, there's multi-cloud, and I think HCI fits in that overall solution spectrum because customers want choice. And I believe that if it was just classic enterprise workloads, maybe there was some argument about could you just put everything in the public cloud or hold on to it in the private cloud. But with AI and RAG, especially on the inference side, I think there is a whole new conversation around data gravity and how people don't want to put that data out in the public arena. So HCI will definitely solve that part of the solution for AI. But then, of course, HCI is also solving for multiple workloads, especially from, including mission critical workloads.
Oscar, bring us home here.
I'll do my best. No, I think the future for HCI is bright. Obviously, I'm a little biased working for Nutanix, right? But reality is that we've come a very long way in the terms of capabilities for the workloads that HCI can run today, and I don't think that's going to change. I think it's going to accelerate. Newer processors are more capable. We get more and denser storage with every generation of storage innovation, right? We're also seeing more and more powerful GPUs that we're putting in these systems, right? I mean, Wendell mentioned an article that our CEO talked about AI and ML workloads, right? We also launched a new compute node very recently using Supermicro's latest generations that's GPU heavy. It's intended to help customers get on board with the AI and actually do inference and RAG training on premises, because I think what Praveen said is like it has a lot of a lot of importance, like some of the data you don't really want to move outside of the data centers when you start experimenting with AI, right? That's one of the things that we see. So I think what we're going to see in the future for HCI is really, we're going to see more capable platforms enabling the technology. We're going to see more critical workloads move on to HCI. And I think over the next year, we're going to see a lot of AI ML workloads start out in the data center on HCI, because it's really easy to get started, basically.
Yeah, so why don't we stay with you, because I know that there's a little bit of an offer that you guys have that if some of the organizations want to take the next step and do some sort of test drive, what should they really be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. They should go to Nutanix.com and look for our test drive program. So thank you for that plug. Basically, we have a whole site set up to make it easy for either customers wanted to look at a new part of our product line, or presumptive customers looking to understand what our technology is about, actually allowing them to test drive online, do some of the basic management functionality, see how our lifecycle control works, and things like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. Again, I think this has been fantastic and really shows the flexibility that HCI can bring to organizations, and really, especially where cloud is everywhere. It's not a place, it is an operating model, and I think this is really a key for it. Also, hey, if you're still in there watching this, note that our next session on hyperscale AI, secure data services for CSPs, is going to be on August 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you for watching this episode, the new Hyperconverged, enabling high performance workloads for the enterprise. Stay tuned.